All right, let's do a quick video on compression. So basically we've got about 6 different compressors that we can use, and the most common compressor that you're going to see on most of the channels is within the SSL-E channel. All right, so it's just called SSL channel, but it is the E channel variation. So the compression is found in the top right there. You can see you've got ratio, threshold, release, and a fast or slow attack button. What kind of ratio is typical? Well, I don't think about ratio actually. What I think about is gain reduction. So if I can find something where I'm reducing some gain, bass was doing some stuff, so let's go to bass. You still do miracles. So you can see there, this orange light turns on for every 3 decibels that it is reducing, which means it's turning it down by 3. And if it goes up more, it's turning it down by 6, 10, 14, 20. So I can control how much it actually turns down by pushing the input gain a little bit more. So let's try that. So you can see there, I turned it up, but it didn't actually sing louder because the compressor is working harder and it was compressing 6 now instead of 3. So the other way that I can control how much reduction it's doing is by pulling the threshold up. So let's try with the threshold right down, and we'll have no compression. So it kind of sounds a bit flat, it's not very full. You can't really tell, it's not super loud, but hopefully you can tell. And I'll start to increase the threshold. So you can see there, I got 6 dB of reduction because I pulled the threshold way up. And yeah, there's sometimes I do that. So on the sub bass channel, I actually do that. Let's just get the sub bass. Within a group, you can right click on a solo channel and get that single channel without having to turn all the groups off. So yeah, that's a handy feature to remember. So anyway, soloed on is the sub bass. So you can see that I'm compressing way harder. I haven't changed that yet. And I've also got my ratio at almost, it's basically 8. And yeah, I'm trying to get a really consistent level from the sub bass channel so that whenever I turn up this fader, I'm adding in a consistent level of sub bass, and it doesn't change the level of the whole bass too much. It's just adding in bass consistently. So yeah, you've got your input gain and your threshold. So basically, if you're looking at your compressor and it's compressing a lot, maybe your input gain is a bit too high, or maybe your threshold is a little bit too high, and you might want to change that. The first thing I'd probably look at is this input gain here. What we can do is bypass the compressor, and we can look at the fader, and this is set to our input, and we're getting a good amount of level there, so that's fine. Turn the compressor back on, and then we can come to our threshold and go, yep, we want it to just touch and just sort of hit 3 dB. If you want to do more, like I'm doing with that sub bass channel, that makes sense. But other things don't really make sense to really compress over the top, other than maybe overheads or snare bottom, because you really want a different thing to happen with that. Let's have a listen to our snare bottom. So you can see there, it's kind of compressing pretty hard, but I'm okay with that because I've got my main snare sound coming from the top channel, and it still sounds pretty good when it's blended in. Let's add them both together. So that bottom snare channel is just giving me a little ch, and the top one is giving me the full drum sound and a little bit of sizzle and crack on top as well. So that's probably one example of how I would over compress a channel, but generally I'm trying not to over compress things. I'm just trying to level them out a little bit, maybe do 3 or 6 dB of reduction, and I'm trying to control the levels with the faders after that. But if you're doing more compression than that, what you'll find is you just won't be able to find the channel, as in you'll keep pushing up the fader and still it's being compressed and squashed down, and you can't get the top dynamic range out of it. So that's our SSL channel there. The other thing to note is obviously ratio. As the ratio goes up, it can do more compression. If it's at 1, it's basically doing nothing. So yeah, and then we've got our release and attack. Let's have a look at this kick. So for most of our drums, I think you'll find the attack is set to slow, which is on this side of the fast attack. And the reason for that is we don't actually want the compressor to engage when the drummer hits the drum. At the start of that, we want to actually hear that transient, and then we want the compressor to act and take the tail and try and sustain that. So that's why most of these are set to slow attack. I say most because I guarantee, yes, our snare bottom is being squashed super hard, and we're actually squashing the transient out of that. I think that's also the same with most stuff here. I've set it to slow attack because we don't mind the transient to come through. If you wanted to set it to a faster attack, you'll end up with no transients. The release. So the release we can look at when this light here of reduction goes away and try and time it with the music. Or what you could sort of do is think about the tail of a kick drum. Because like I said, attack and release really matters the most to drums, I think, and vocals and things that kind of come in and out, not things that sustain and go on for too long. I'm just going to zoom in here. So if I turn this to samples, we can get an idea of, actually milliseconds, we can get an idea of how long one kick drum usually lasts for, or a drum. So within a beat, we're looking at 188, what's that, maybe a 16th of this beat. At 72, we're looking at 188 milliseconds. So if we go to our channel, that would look like this. So if we set it to that, it should engage for that amount of time, and then let go of the compression. Let's loop a little bit. Let's try and engage the compressor. So you can see that the reduction turns off relatively in time with the music. But generally, we try and keep it a little bit low, not too low, so that it's basically doing nothing, because again, we're doing a slow attack. If you did a slow release, it's doing very little to the sound. But yeah, I mean, typically, I don't actually try to compress kick drums. The main stuff I try and compress is more so toms, a little bit of snare top. And yeah, let's move on. That's a lot of time that we spent on the SSL channel compressor. We've also got a whole bunch of other really nice compressors to look at. So let's look at this fabulous reproduction of the G-Bus compressor, SSL. So it's similar, but different. It's got 3 notched ratios of 2, 4, and 10. Attack, release, threshold, makeup gain. So basically, you don't control the input gain, but you can control the output gain. So this is our drum comp channel. So it's compressing pretty hard. It's compressing at 10 ratio, and it's letting the transients through again with a millisecond of latency of attack. It's not latency. All right, and the release set to 0.3. I think we could bump that up 1 notch and it would still sound good, but I think these settings sound the best for a drum comp channel. So let's have a look at how much the reduction happens. You can see the reduction up the top here. All right, so it's not playing super loud. Let's find a loud bit. All right, so we're kind of peaking at maybe 12, maybe 10 decibels of reduction. And we've set our output gain to 10. So what that means is that the compressor is scooping down 10, but it's also making up 10. So that means our sustain is added back in, but it's not attacking straight away. It's attacking and letting the transients come through a little bit, and we can get a little bit more fatness out of the drum. So let's hear what it sounds like without any of this drum comp bus. and we bring it back in. So it sounds really fat, and it adds fatness to the whole mix, and that's how that works. So our G-Bus compressor is also used in other places. I put it again on all the drums. Here's the setting for that. You see the needle only just really move. Oh, that snare really popped it open there. And it's making up, so maybe I could set the threshold a little bit lower. We're ratio 4:1 on this side, and release is basically the same. Making up 3, so we want to take away 3. Anyway, that does sound pretty good. I'm not going to change it. It's also on the music bus, doing a similar kind of thing. Now it's set to auto and 4:1 ratio. It's also on our master bus. Have a look at this. Similar to the music bus, adding some sweet fatness to our whole mix, which is great. Alright, so let's just quickly touch on the F670. So this is based on the Fairchild 670, which is a really great Vari-Mu tube compressor. Have a look at what that means on the internets. Basically, the ratio, I think this is how it works. The ratio changes as the input hits it harder. So as it gets louder, your ratio and reduction is going to go even tighter, even more, and it gives this really gooey, chewy kind of compression to the sound. So you've got this really only occurring on the overheads, because it is one of those classic things that everybody does, and they're just like, this is how it should be. Everybody needs a Fairchild on their overheads because that's the sound, and it does sound pretty good. And yeah, so how much compression am I doing in here? I'm doing some compression here too. Let's turn that off so we can just hear what the Fairchild's doing. Right, so my understanding is the time constant is actually release, and then you've got threshold, input gain, pretty self-explanatory. I don't actually know what this thing means. I think it links it, or it does it left, it's ladder, yeah. Anyway. Let's hear it without. Alright, so it's quieter, but it just adds that, it almost adds some kind of brilliance to it because it's, you know, going through emulation of analog circuitry. But anyway, that's our Fairchild 670. So we've got the CLA 76, which is basically an 1176. The way I'm treating this is I've got an LA2A on these vocals. So I'm using two different compressors on these vocals. I've got an LA2A and an 1176, and they're both Chris Lord-Alge's Waves audio version. So you've got your input gain on the LA2A. I basically use that as kind of my, if I don't have enough gain, sometimes I'll just chuck it here because we are live. It's not, we're not trying to make something perfect and can't always get the gain staging right on vocals. So we make it up with this knob right here with gain. And then all it has is peak reduction. And another thing to remember is if you see any analog button here, I would just keep that to off, because as that goes through all of these different buses that compress and pick up all the noise, we don't need any extra noise. There's plenty in there, especially with guitars and whatever. But anyway, just keep that to off. So you get peak reduction, which just, you can see, will just reduce as we pull that up. So let's have a look at Phil.
Your spirit breaking out, your kingdom moving in.
Right, so sometimes it come up to about 7 of reduction, and that's totally fine. But if it's reducing up to 20, it's like you've got to change something before that. You've got to turn down your input gain, whatever it is. Yeah, and then this gain on the side doesn't actually control the reduction. All it controls is actually your output gain. 1176, it does something slightly different to the LA2A. So we've got, I can turn down his input and it changes how much reduction is happening. But as I turn it up on the input, it reduces more, and that's based also on the ratio. So treat the the CLA76 as a faster compressor and the LA2A as a slower compressor. So LA2A is doing some overall leveling and the 1176 is doing some faster fixes of all the compression. Except it's not, because I would probably set it to this if I were doing that. So this is a good setting to get some faster stuff sorted out. And I'm talking about faster changes in dynamics. So let's have a look.
Your spirit breaking out. Your
So you can see that the needle came back really quickly because it's not it's not doing overall leveling. It's doing just when he punches it really quickly and there's something really sharp dynamically coming in, it's gonna just grab that and pull it down again. And then we can change our output gain and make up whatever we've lost. Best way to do that is to bypass the plugin and sort of match it once you've got your gain reduction right. So let's do that.
your spirit breaking out.
I think that's actually maybe a little bit less.
Your spirit breaking out. Your kingdom moving in. Your victory claims the ground that the enemy.
I like to add just a touch more so you know that it's kind of just, yeah. If ever it's, too quiet, that's kind of annoying. So I kind of just push it above what unity gain feels like. That's just me. Probably shouldn't do that, but anyway. And that's a de-esser. That's probably another video. So what else we got? C6. So C6 is really only occurring on our MCs and some of these buses here, and the way I'm using it over here is as a sidechain compressor, but only for the bands that I turn on. So it does look very confusing and like it's got too many options, but basically if you were just to bypass all of these but one, it'd be a straight ahead just whatever compressor. So just focus on one and have a look at those dials as you're trying to figure it out for yourself and try and understand what it's doing. You've got regular old threshold. So what are we looking at? Guitars.
Your kingdom moving.
So what happens is with this, actually, you know what, this is probably for another video, but read the manuals is probably what I would say with that, is check out the manuals and that will explain some things that could take me way too long to explain. Also, CLA3A is basically the same as LA2A. We use it for guitars because, again, it's one of those ultimate formula things that people have figured out. LA3A sounds great for guitars and some other things. LA2A sounds good for other things. Cool.